on their whereabouts, we're asking you call 1-800-CALL-FBI or submit a tip online to fbi.gov/New Orleans fugitives. We're working side by side with our law enforcement partners. New Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office remains the lead investigative agency here, and we are helping. Thank you very much.
We'll take questions from each. Go ahead from Channel 4.
Yeah, is there any indication that friends or family on the outside were aware in advance or communicating about these plans?
And we're not going to get into the details of the investigation, Major Phipps, but we're looking at all angles.
What does it say, and I mean this respectfully, but you said, and I'm going to quote you here, that you observed those guys running out at 1 o'clock in the morning. What does it say for jailhouse safety and security when you see a jailbreak like that, but you fail to notify anyone, NOPD, the public, anyone?
We didn't say that.
What did you say then?
Yeah, we observed on the video later this morning. We had to pull that video.
He said you observed at 1 a.m.
So let's be clear. I said what we observed on the video through investigation. So yes, when they looked at the video this morning after the staff realized they were gone, my investigators found that at 1 a.m. that's what happened.
So no one was watching live video all night at the jail?
I won't say no one was watching live video.
Then how did nobody see them leaving the jail?
There are over 900 cameras.
How did nobody see them leaving the jail?
There are over 900 cameras
I
in
know,
this
it's
facility.
just, how did no one see a massive jailbreak?
The why and how is part of the investigation. So we have interviewed, I think, all of our employees, and we are interviewing all of the residents of that particular pod as well. And then there's a lot of people that you've got to wade through their interviews to find out, to get down to the details of what happened. There was somebody on duty.
Sheriff, a source told us that phone calls haven't been monitored over the past week, and escaped inmates were planning how they were going to get out through phone calls. Were y'all monitoring phone calls?
We monitor phone calls all the time. There are 1,400 people in this jail, over the City Council 1250 limit. So can you monitor every single person every day? No, we don't have the bodies to do that. But we do monitor, and we rely on tips, and we have an intelligence unit that monitors what's going on in the jail. There's a lot of things at any given time going on.
But it's your job. It's your job to monitor every single person in this facility every day.
Visually, with our deputies on the pods. Yes.
Shady,
I did have a question. The former sheriff, Marlon Gusman, he disputes the claims that there were a lot of issues here at the facility after he left. Do you stand by your statement about the issues with it? And also, we learned that you have a $14 million fund balance. Why wasn't that money used to repair the locks? If you could talk about that.
Can I speak I can speak more intelligently, I believe, to the physical plan in the jail. Not necessarily design, but at some point this jail was planned, and it was obviously planned to be a minimum custody facility. I don't know what the dynamics of the population was in New Orleans as far as those incarcerated around that time, but that is not the dynamic now. Right now we have 24 pods, and 90% of those pods are populated with high security inmates. Those are people that are predatory, assaultive, violent, and aggressive. So we're in the process now of developing an ad-seg unit, because we identified a large number of individuals that needed to be on some type of restrictive housing environment that did not exist at this facility. So it's plenty of deficiencies when we start to talk about the physical plan. So it's not correct to say that those things didn't exist, because I mean they're prevalent.
This
So
you
had a convicted.
This jail opened in 2015 and 2022. They never had a jailbreak. So when you say it's not built for that or it's not ready, they never had a jailbreak from 2015 to 2022 like this.
The sheriff says it all the time. She talks about the 83% recidivism rate. So you got people in and out of here all the time. So they've been here and
but you just said this is a minimum security.
No, I said
it's a minimum security facility.
I said it was built, had to be built for a minimum. So
they had maximum security inmates in here from 2015 to 2022.
You started talking about locks. I don't know of a max security inmate. Right now they had an objective classification system in place. I don't know if that was in place to identify properly if there were max security. It may have been everybody clumped together. We know now, based on our objective criteria, that we do have people that are classified at a higher security level than what this particular facility was built for.
Yeah, Chief,
Talking
you
about
had
failures in
Jay,
the
you had
pods,
Jay,
is
Go to
you
there
had,
a
David.
maintenance and
Chris,
service
we're gonna go to
contract
David for a
at this
second.
time in place? Is there a
Chris.
maintenance and service contract in
We're not
place?
listening. David,
We're
go ahead
talking
with your
about
question.
failures within the pod.
You had
Once
a
again, is there a
convicted
maintenance and
murderer
service contract
in
in
the-
place?
there was a
Travis gets
convicted
asked
murderer
multiple
in that,
questions.
right?
David
We're
has not
asking
answered
another
the question
question.
yet.
I really can't
Is there a
hear you.
maintenance and
Please.
service contract in
Chris,
place
please.
with
there was a
Call your
convicted
voice.
murderer in there, right, who had already been convicted, and he was in among these 10, right? Were they in separate cells, and
Everyone
he was in a minimum
every-
security area?
Everyone here is two to a cell, and that's what we have. And we've been in constant communication with anybody that's been convicted with the Department of Corrections to come and pick up those individuals that have been convicted. We have 78 individuals right now. We've been in communication with the Department of Corrections, and they're assured us that they're going to come and get these.
So what about
individuals.
Derrick Rose?
I'm not familiar with Derrick Rose if he's been sentenced. I know he's been here for a long period of time. So if he's been recently sentenced, that's great. He would have been on our list. He may be aware of that. He would be on our list to go to the Department of Corrections. But they have, the Department of Corrections and Public Safety have worked with us to move several inmates that have been sentenced. They come twice a week. I just got off the phone when I stepped out here then with the Department of Corrections to identify how many individuals we have that have been sentenced, that are taking up space, that are high security people, that have long sentences, and they all are violent.
And what's being done
Talking
to
about
protect
the-
the witnesses
talking about the
in
difference-
that case? Is there something being done to protect the witnesses who testified against him in
Deal
that
with the
case?
jail,
I mean, he's
so there'll be
convicted.
someone-
That's what Captain meant to address earlier. All those have been in contact.
Talking about the
Go ahead, Chris.
talking about the pods and the deteriorating conditions, is there a maintenance and service contract in place to make repairs? And we're also hearing that critical cameras were down for weeks.
We have, this is our CFO, Bianca Brown, to talk more about that.
Hi, so I'm Bianca Brown. So based upon the question that you asked earlier about the fund balance related to the 2023 audit, I'll give you the breakdown of that. 4.2 million was related to accounts payable. 9.5 million was related to FEMA restricted cash, but capital projects only. The CJ restricted cash had about 98,000 in it. Due to others, which was processing fee, DAPs, clerk of courts, NOPD property room, they get about 97,000 of that money. We had due to the Department of Public Safety for civilian backgrounds that we conduct, that was about 400,000. And then we also had a detail account that's kind of restricted for radios, video cameras, tactical gear, software, and maintenance for the deputies that they pay based upon their details. So that doesn't exist. That's failed. That money doesn't exist. That was from a 2023 audit that they reported on, and those funds don't exist. As of today, that balance is about 6.3 million that is still due out as of 2025.
And I know that you.
So if we could answer my
Shay,
question, we asked a
What is your
question,
question?
nobody answered.
What is your
Once
question?
again, we asked multiple times, is there a maintenance and service contract in place to take care of the deteriorating conditions within the pods and within the jail?
We can't
We're also
afford a
hearing that
maintenance
there's
and service
critical cameras
contract.
that are not working.
So right now, we can't afford a maintenance service contract. We have maintenance staff that are on board that do the day-to-day. But right now, our current budget sits at about 68 million. 41.1 million comes from the city, 13 million comes from the millage, and about 10.1 million a quarter is given to us. Right now, our payroll is about 9.6. Our food expenses is 780,000 a quarter. That eats up the money. We don't have the funding available to have a full maintenance contract to do this. We've explained this on multiple occasions. Just on Monday, we went to the City Planning Commission and we reported this out. We asked for the money to secure this. So the funding is not available to do what needs to be
So if
done.
your
and it
conditions
hasn't been
are
done.
not appropriate enough to handle violent offenders like the ones that escaped today, have you all considered potentially shipping them elsewhere?
We can't
I would
afford
speak to
it.
that.
Also, just real
Let him
quick,
answer this question before you go.
your budget is bigger than Marlon Gusman's was. Do you all realize that the last sheriff had a smaller budget than you have?
The budget was bigger, but guess what? Things are being deprived. So what you're seeing is a result of what's happening now. Broken doors, you got facilities, wear and tear. All of that is occurring now due to that budget. This size facility, this should have a $150 million budget easily. The budget that we have, it doesn't support what we need. I've laid out the numbers. You see, it's critical.
Did you have a follow-up?
I want to, if I could, speak to what you said, have we explored shipping outboarding individuals? Yes, we have. We've sent out numerous individuals, high security people, to various places. The Department of Corrections and Public Safety has helped us with that. We've sent people to Plaquemine. We've sent people to Catahoula. We've sent people to Madison. We've sent people to Angola. 30%, almost 40% of those individuals we see get remanded back for various reasons. So that takes up space. And the ones we sent to Catahoula, this is important, the ones we sent to Madison and the ones we sent to Plaquemine, all of these are parole violators. So these people are convicted felons that committed a crime here in New Orleans as either a pass-through, having fun, or whatever they were doing, and they ended up in the jail.
And look, circling back, what are you specifically doing to capture these violent offenders?
What do you mean?
What is the sheriff's office doing right now to capture these violent
The
offenders?
sheriff's office is working along with the 200 partner offices that I mentioned earlier and actually capture these individuals. We're providing critical intel. So we are combing through those phone calls and other messages you mentioned earlier to identify who they communicated with, where they could potentially be. So along with our partners, we are visiting those locations in search of those individuals.
Are those video calls on those iPads recorded as well? Video calls on iPads?
I can't answer whether those are recorded. I know the phone calls are recorded. I don't want to say yes or no on video.
Here's a question.
Specifically, Derek Burgess, what are y'all doing to capture him?
Chief said yes, they are
He's
recorded.
convicted of murder.
A CMT.
All right, we have one more question.
Okay,
Go
if I
ahead.
could-
Tavon,
okay.
you haven't had one.
The surveillance that we saw that they were wearing their orange jumpsuits, but you said when they got into the neighborhood they shed their clothes. Was someone there waiting to give them a change of clothes? Did they have clothes as contraband underneath their jumpsuits?
So right now we can't say we haven't seen all of the video to say that from the neighborhood on whether they had additional clothing.
And I
But
just
what we
have
knew is
one.
they shed some of their orange.
And a CMT is a civilian position,
Correction.
right? Should maximum security inmates be watched by a civilian CMT? And if you could talk a little bit more, I know you said that they were on a break. Could you give us some more specifics on that?
Sure. So yes, the CMT is a corrections monitoring technician. She is a civilian. She sits in a pod module and observes the pod. That is primarily when we do not have the physical deputy staff to sit on the pod. We have a vacancy rate like every other correctional agency in the country. Every corrections has a 55% vacancy rate across this country. Like us, we are underfunded, understaffed, underpaid. So we do our best to hire staff and retain them, but like everyone else, we're short. So yes, this civilian was assigned to the pod module to observe the pod. When she stepped away to grab food, that is when they began their attempts to escape. By the time she returned, they were already into the cell or gone. So she did not even know that they had made good on their escape or made an attempt to escape.
How long was she
Sheriff,
away?
do you want to
I don't have that
speak to
time
the
to-
people? I think everybody's live in here. Do you want to say you're sorry to the people of New Orleans for having this happen? I mean, we've heard from you several times today, but do you want to offer any kind of contrition or apology to people for something like this happening?
Well, first we have to find out exactly what happened and how they got out. We think this was intentional. There is much more than meets the eye in this investigation. And why did it happen just right now, right? In the middle, as we're getting ready to start this sheriff's race. This is very suspicious. We know that they had help. We're showing you they had help. This was coordinated. There's much more than meets the eye. When I have enough information, I'll be glad to talk to the community about my issues or what I need, anything I may need to apologize.
That's a healthy
This is a public safety issue first and foremost. There's much more than meets the eye. We are digging and we are not going to stop.
Are you suggesting that your opponents are orchestrating this from behind the scenes?
What is OPSO doing tonight to make sure that this facility is safe and that no one else can escape? Once again, Sheriff.
WL Louisiana News at 6 begins with breaking news.
Well, you just watched an explosive press conference with Sheriff Susan Hudson, members of the FBI, the NOPD, and of course, members of the Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office giving us an update, which is kind of a shocking update. Mike, you've been inside of that jail. You know what's going on here. Tell us, based on what they said, what do you have to say to this?
I think my head is exploding. That was stunning. The video, the planning, what we saw was obviously not just a spur of the moment escape. They were cutting through rebar, getting rid of a toilet from behind a concrete wall. Mm-hmm. Clearly, they are looking at the advanced planning, whether there was inside and outside help. And the sheriff did say that they are I guess, just starting the in-depth investigation.
Yeah.
But just the video of these inmates going through first jostling the jail cell door, which we have heard is problematic, and then getting through those holes, busted through a toilet that had been removed, through cells, over walls.
This clearly took time. No one, if you notice in the video, we have not seen anyone. Based on your
And look,
interview with Marlon Guzman, no one is there.
We have heard both facility breakdowns, personnel breakdowns. We have 3 deputies now suspended. The module where a person is supposed to be stationed to keep an eye on the pod, unmanned, they say because of a shortage of personnel. And then the
not only unmanned, but it was a civilian employee who is not a sheriff's deputy who has been hired because of their shortage of deputies. And this person is supposed to monitor the cameras. Well, that person went away and got something to eat.
That's another level. So this was unmanned pod. You seem to have some of the most violent accusations against any inmate. It doesn't get any worse than murder.
Right. Yes.
Without that pod being manned, number one. Then someone who is in another control center with the cameras of that whole tier, 4 different pods, was out getting something to eat.
Literally out to lunch.
Getting something to eat, giving them enough time to make this escape. Not just a single inmate, but you saw the 10 inmates racing out of the building and across the I-10.
It was really shocking to see, to be honest.
This was a very tactical undertaking that did not happen. I mentioned this maybe 3 hours ago. It's not like a guy who's kind of a bad guy walking down the street and he sees somebody left their front door open, so he decides to go in, a crime of opportunity. This was a crime of meticulous planning in advance. It may have taken a month or more to plan something like this.
I find it hard to believe that there wasn't some communication trail that they can find, not only in between with these inmates and among inmates in the jail, but with people on the outside.
It's probably going to take capturing 1 or 2 of them and getting their phones to then start retracing it. Because unless you start with a number, a cell phone number, and it's probably burner phones, let's face it. So they've got to get somebody to break down. They got to catch them all. Then the 10, among them, somebody's going to break and say who it was on the outside. That person probably was not, or may not have been using a burner, and then they can start tracing all the calls back.
Now, to be fair, they do not live monitor calls from some 1,400 inmates. As we have seen it used in, say, court trials, the inmate who's on trial or who might be the subject of some suspicion, they go to the most recent calls of that inmate. I guarantee you, they're doing that now. But the fact that they had no prior tip, information, suspicion on something that involved removing a toilet from behind a cell,
cutting
through rebar,
removing the bolts that were all of this is bolted in, by the way.
And that's going to take some tools, if not heavy machinery, some days in advance of the escape itself, which the timing just happened that there was an unmanned pod in the tier with the security module that has the cameras. That person was out getting something to eat.
And that rebar is even thicker than what you see, what's called highway mesh, and the kind of rebar that's like as thick as my finger. We're talking about stuff that looked like it was about 1 inch to 1.5 inches in diameter, thick of rebar.
And I believe
that is industrial strength rebar.
I believe they said it was clean cut.
Yes, it was clearly cut. So
they
had something with it.
Really a specific type of blade with a specific type of instrument to cut.
Let's go right now. Hold up 1 second. 1 second,
these inmates don't have.
We're going to David Hammer right now. He was inside listening and had questions, and some questions that we had here. David, can you give us an update on what you just heard? Because there was so much that was out there. It went from talking about how the escape happened, seeing the video, then an argument regarding funding, and of course underfunding and underpaid. This really kind of got explosive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we heard the sheriff basically defending what they did with limited resources and that they didn't have enough to do a general maintenance contract to be able to keep these cells from being broken through and to be able to also have a proper staffing to monitor these pods, and that they had this one civilian monitor who left to go on a break when all of this happened. And of course, it seems that these individuals knew that that was when that monitor was going to go on the break. When the monitor came back from the break, she had no idea that anybody had left. They had then gathered in a single cell and were able to escape that way. And, you know, there are 200 officers out there now. They were talking about high rewards for anybody with any information. They were also talking about protecting witnesses who testified against these inmates, one of whom was actually convicted recently of murder, and they have very grave concerns about the safety of the witnesses in those cases and of the victims in some of these other cases where people are awaiting trial. So Deputy Stephanie Minto-Gibson said that they have been working with victims to try to protect them. We heard Darlene Costanza saying that they're offering big rewards, and so too is the FBI. But again, they even brought up the CFO to talk about their the condition of what kind of funding they have, and they say that they just don't have enough to do this maintenance. And then at the end, in a very explosive moment, you heard the sheriff suggest that this was somehow political, that somehow the people escaping now or being allowed to escape was done with the knowledge or coercion or coordination with her political opponents, which was an incredible claim to make, which I tried to ask her about as she was leaving, and she wouldn't take that question. So absolutely explosive here tonight.
You know, David, we're here talking about it right now as you're mentioning this. I know that you asked a question earlier. Katie, you brought this up as well, the recordings of the iPads that all of the
inmates have tablets, and they can do video calls back and forth to their loved ones on these tablets, which is like a Zoom call. Pretty regularly in the jail. And now one of the investigative tools that they have always used is jail calls that are recorded. What was the answer when you asked them if those Zoom calls are recorded and if they're looking at those?
Well, initially the deputy said that they didn't know, or he didn't know. Then he checked and found out that yes, indeed, they are recorded. But again, if they don't have the people actively monitoring those or checking back on them, then all the recordings in the world won't make a difference if they don't have the information or they're not monitoring to make sure that that information isn't being shared and the coordination of this escape wasn't being done in advance.
You would hope that that's what they were checking now, that they would be checking into those video messages, those jail calls to see who they were talking to, who the last people that they were talking to. I mean, all those investigative resources that our security experts have been talking about throughout the day.
Well, David, a quick question for you. We got to the point that three employees were suspended. Do we know who they are? Is it the person that was inside of the module watching the cameras, or what?
Right, that's a very good question. We asked that. They didn't give any additional details. They said that more details would be forthcoming about who was suspended. But again, the suspensions of 3 staff members there, and we don't know whether they were because they weren't where they were supposed to be. Was it that the civilian monitor wasn't supposed to have left, or was that person allowed to have left and there should have been somebody else looking at that time? Again, they didn't have any deputy who was actively on the pod at that time, and you only had the one civilian monitor who was monitoring from a remote location inside a booth. So again, no eyes on this at the time at that location is what we're now being told.
That is shocking, I think, to anyone who heard that. Another shocking situation is, just the fact that we have executives at the jail saying that this is a minimum security facility from top to bottom, and that we have some of the most serious offenders who are either past offenders or awaiting trial, or who have been convicted, including one of these offenders who are being housed in this jail. That is shocking, I think, to everyone, that this is considered a minimum security facility from top to bottom.
And that's exactly what I asked to the warden, who said that this was designed for minimal security, but they are so overwhelmed with people who should be in high security locations that they don't have those people sectioned off. And he said that actually sometimes they have people convicted who should be then moved to state prison who are still waiting to be moved, and they are still on this more minimal security location, and that appears to be the case with Derek Groves, although we are checking into that. But these are examples of things where they are apparently not keeping up with the demand. They're understaffed, and they don't have the ability to respond in a timely manner. You see that in the timeline and how slowly they responded, how slowly they got the information out to the public, but you also see it in sometimes these people being held in places where they shouldn't be for long periods of time, even after convictions where they should be transferred to the Department of Corrections.
David, one of the questions that I had, well, the comments rather that I had to Mike and to Clancy Dubose was 10 people in one cell and no one saw. Also, too, Alyssa Curtis is inside of here. We were all just having a conversation about that video that you got an opportunity to watch. How long did it take them to open up those cell doors? Because it seemed like the amount of time that passed by, enough that they had to speed the video up, amount of time that passed by, someone should have been in that module.
I'm here.
Right, we don't know exactly the timeline on the video because they did take these different clips, but we know that it was 12:23 a.m. where the first breakage must have happened according to the earlier press conference, and then 1:01 a.m. before they were out of the building, and then I believe they said 1:18 a.m. and they were actually going across the interstate. So that was a long period of time of something in the order of 40 minutes. Yeah, well, 40 minutes at least before they were able to scale that wall. So that's when they're inside the actual jail facility where they could have been monitored, and obviously there were video recordings of them inside the facility, and whether that was being watched actively at the time is still unclear.
I think it's obvious that there was a catastrophic delay all the way around, delay after delay after delay in this situation, and now here we are, only one of them has been recaptured at this hour.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And as I said before, you have people who testified in court against them. You have victims in these violent crimes who are very concerned right now and are concerned for their own protection, and they have to flee the area in order to, avoid being attacked by the escaped inmates. That is the fear anyway.
Yeah, it's just such a crazy situation that we're all in, watching, waiting, wondering when we're going to see more of these inmates recaptured.
Yeah, David, I think we're going to listen a little bit more earlier. We heard from the jail CFO. This is when things got a little bit testy. We're just going to listen to some of that press conference a little bit earlier.
So right now, we can't afford a maintenance service contract. We have maintenance staff that are on board that do the day-to-day. But right now, our current budget sits at about $68 million. $41.1 million comes from the city, $13 million comes from the millage, and about $10.1 million a quarter is given to us. Right now, our payroll is about $9.6. Our food expenses is $780,000 a quarter. That eats up the money. We don't have the funding available to have a full maintenance contract to do this. We've explained this on multiple occasions. Just on Monday, we went to the City Planning Commission and we reported this out. We asked for the money to secure this. So the funding is not available to do what needs to be done.
So if your conditions are not...
Well, obviously there was a conversation about budgets there. I asked Mike this earlier. Clancy, what do you think based off this press conference? What are we taking away from this? Because it got very combative at some points.
Chaos.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's what one word, chaos. That's what we've got here. Mm-hmm. And it's, I could see if there was such a thing as a public trust meter that you could see on the screen, it would just be going down, down, down right now. And I'm not seeing anything that is inspiring the assurance and trust of the public coming out of there.
And mind you, the chaos is not abating until 9 of those escapees are back in custody. Right. The longer they're out, the more difficult it is to find and round them up. I think the chaos will be increasing. Even as we get answers to the escape itself, we have 9 potentially very dangerous individuals on the loose.
And we're not suggesting that anybody panic. This is not cause for panic, but it is cause for vigilance. Lock all your doors, lock your gates, and make sure you know where your loved ones are. And just stay cool, but just don't panic, but don't be lackadaisical either.
Right. With that in mind,
eyes and ears
we
open.
can put their pictures on the screen right now, because again, as we say all of this, and as people are going through their budgets and the politics of it all, we still have 9 people that are on the streets right now. And they are, some of them, in for some very serious offenses, second-degree murder, murder charges, felon charges.
And a murder conviction.
Yes. I mean, you know, people are there for some very serious charges, and people who are there who probably shouldn't be there, as we just heard.
And it's not just in New Orleans. You heard the State Attorney General say, and you heard the FBI say something that we talked about 2 or 3 hours ago. These guys could be as far away as Georgia, Texas, Arkansas, Tennessee, Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, because the FBI is involved because they think state lines likely were crossed, and that.
I mean, they had an 8-hour head start before the sheriff's office was even aware of what was going on, right? And so then from there, from 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock, the public was still in the dark about what was going on.
As of now, it's more than 17 hours.
More than 17 hours that they've been out and on the run.
And Clancy, you mentioned that this clearly had signs of advanced planning. Wouldn't that also extend to advanced planning on what to do once they are out?
You know?
Well, I mean, think about it. You got clean-cut rebar. You have bolts that are taken out. When they looked at, you did the comparison between what they got through, removing that toilet system, and what it typically looks like. That takes time.
And but if they were able to think about that level of detail, to your point, Mike, you can bet that there was a plan for them that they shed their clothes, got into civilians' clothes, and they got into some kind of transportation. And they're, you know, some of them may have wanted to go back and see a friend or whatever, but
unless they didn't have the resources.
That they're out of here.
You know, unless they didn't have the resources. Yeah, you know, like the one who was caught in the French Quarter. I mean, that
but
obviously.
That's the thing that worries people a lot, because we think about that juvenile escapee who did get out and was able to hurt someone after taking a vehicle. And so that's why people are concerned about the people who are still out there. If they do not have the resources, then some people will take the resources.
Right.
And so that's where the concern comes in.
And you mentioned resources, it almost sounds like these escapees had more resources than the people watching them.
Yeah, it does sound that way. You know, and I think a point that's been made over and over by law enforcement is that they really have nothing to lose. Many of them, especially Groves, who was just convicted of second-degree murder, you know, he's serving a life sentence. He's staring down a life sentence. That's where he's headed. So he really has nothing to lose at this point.
Yeah. And so right now you're getting a look
Which makes them very desperate.
Correct. Yeah, very true. Right now you're getting a look at some of the inmates, 9 inmates that are still on the run. We heard from Sheriff Susan Hudson that 3 employees inside of the jail have been put on suspension. We do not know which one of these employees they are. We're just making assumptions at this point because they didn't have answers for us here. But they're still looking for these people. So far, FBI was there. NOPD is now involved as well. This is going across state lines, and apparently everyone on the state level, state troopers, if I can get that out, state troopers also paying attention to this. So every level of law enforcement is involved in this case.
And searching for these people. And it is just shocking to us that we've been doing this for this long and we've only seen one of these inmates taken back into custody. U.S. Marshals Service is on the case.
Yeah.
You know, this is a very widespread effort to try and catch these men, and
we typically see this resolve in my time pretty quickly. We typically see it resolved at this time. So to know that amount of people are still out on the roads right now, that lets me know that Clancy's theory is correct, and the fact that this took a lot of planning.
Right.
And look, law enforcement often refers to that first 48 hours. Boy, if 48 hours passes and we have not heard of additional captures, then we've seen it in some of the juvenile escapes, the one from Bridge City, 5 escapes, 4 caught rather quickly. The other one, who was the last one rounded up, I think it was 5 months later.
Yeah, it was. Based on the conversation that you had with Marlon Gusman earlier and connecting that to the video that we just saw, how do the two line up?
Well, he really hit on, he called it a catastrophic failure on many levels. And we were basically seeing that now with this video, getting the door open from the cell, and mind you, that was just one cell, 2 to a cell, 10 inmates escaped. That's 5 cells in which that happened. That was replayed on 5 different cells, getting into yet another cell, the handicapped cell, where this toilet fixture had been removed, rebar cut cleanly with some kind of tool. Obviously, that took advanced planning to get through the loading dock area, over the fence, and then with no trace of these inmates, I think that Gusman obviously was the jail there at the time this facility opened. He said that the measures were there, both the actual video surveillance cameras and the door locks, as well as the personnel manning the pods, manning the central control cameras, and that the breakdowns had to have occurred on these multiple levels for this to happen.
Yeah.
Right.
He's right. He's absolutely right.
Yes.
This was not a one-off.
Yes.
They mentioned, and I heard them mention this, they said their jail, as well as other jails across the country right now, dealing with a manpower shortage. We know that we have had previous conversations about the amount of inmates who are kept in the jail. We heard them mention a little bit earlier about the amount of inmates who are not supposed to be there, who were convicted of their crimes and should have been transferred out, but were sent back. A low manpower, too many people inside of what is a minimum security prison. I mean, some minimum security jail. I mean, what are we doing here?
And talk about the ingredients for a disaster like this, to not have enough personnel on a jail that is physically inadequate without the proper maintenance. And I can tell you, they're calling the entire facility minimum security compared to, say, Angola, Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola. Some of the people, including the Groves, who was convicted of murder and awaiting transfer to Angola, that's where they keep people who have mandatory life. He's not just going to Angola, our maximum security penitentiary. He's going to be in one of the high security areas of Angola. So it just makes you wonder.
How do we not have that?
Why is he even there?
These are, New Orleans has a disproportionate amount of this kind of violent crime, and the people go from this so-called minimum security type facility to not just Angola maximum security, but to the most secure Camp J, for example. I know a couple inmates went straight from Orleans Justice Center to Camp J, which is anyone who's had prior disciplinary problems and escapes. Some of these inmates have the kind of rap sheets that land you in the most secure areas of the maximum security penitentiary in this state.
It makes you wonder, if there was this little staffing on this tier with these inmates in it on this night, how often is that the situation? How often did they have no supervision when they're sitting in that jail, like we've all talked about? They had nothing but time to plan, nothing but time to get ready for this. So if you're sitting in a jail cell unmanned like this over and over again, it just is ripe for catastrophic failure.
And think about, you would think that it was circumstances lent itself to this, with a employee who's supposed to be watching cameras going out to get something to eat. Now that probably, with the advanced planning that clearly was involved here, that probably involved inmates noticing that there are many windows
when you can
of opportunity for this sort of thing. Here's so-and-so taking that dinner break once again.
So-and-so's going to eat, we know.
Right.
And I'm not suggesting that the person who went to go get something to eat was in on it. There just might be a pattern there that they know.
They just might have been,
These inmates, as you said, they have nothing else to do but watch and take notes and think
obviously
about
they all know about
loopholes.
They obviously all know about the problems with the doors. So that clearly is something that needs to be addressed immediately.
It's almost like you hear about, robbers who would case a bank for days and weeks and know when everyone's see they're on a shift change or unmanned, that they could have been watching for that opportunity. And obviously the sink was taken out, or the toilet was taken out rather. The rebar had been cut, and sure enough, on some pattern they noticed previously, they took their opportunity.
All right, you guys, who can't thank you enough for your insight and expertise and for joining us here on SES. We've continued to cover this emergency. I would say it's an emergency with these 9 inmates still on the run.
All right, we're going to continue to cover this on WWL Plus and WUPL, so make sure you join us. This is not over just yet, unfortunately.
WWL Louisiana News at 6:30 starts now.
We have new video showing the moment that 10 inmates escaped from the Orleans Parish Jail. You're looking at it on your screen right now. The Sheriff's Office just released this video a few minutes ago. The Orleans Parish Sheriff says the escape happened overnight, and so far only one inmate has been recaptured.
Oh, that means they've been out for hours now. Here's a look at their mugshots. Many of these inmates, they are still, again, on the run. They're facing charges for some violent crimes like murder, for assault, and more. And they're considered armed and dangerous. The FBI is offering a $5,000 reward for any information leading to the escapees' arrest.
Thanks for watching, everyone. I'm Katie Moore.
And I'm Sharice Gibson. So we do have reaction from local and state leaders who are calling for the public to remain vigilant and to call 911 if you see any of these escaped inmates.
But first, we do want to go to Chief Investigative Reporter David Hammer. He was at the latest news conference from the Sheriff's Office. It was an explosive press conference, lots of yelling, many questions unanswered.
Yeah, Katie and Sharice, it was explosive, extremely explosive, unlike anything that I've really seen in a very long career of covering these. And it was blaming the, lack of staffing, the lack of, funding to maintain the cells that were easily broken by these inmates, and 10 of them get into a single cell and break through a wall where there's a plumbing connection and get through very tough rebar and get out, and nobody notices, and there's a single monitor there who doesn't notice that they're gone. So that was part of the story. Part of the story is the long delay, and then part of the story is that Sheriff Hudson says that this could have been politically motivated, that the timing of it is suspicious with the sheriff's re-election race beginning. And it was extraordinary, and I tried to ask her how she could say or imply that her opponents were part of this, and she just walked off at the end of the press conference. I think we have that sound right now.
We think this was intentional. There is much more than meets the eye in this investigation. And why did it happen just right now, right? In the middle, as we're getting ready to start this sheriff's race. This is very suspicious. We know that they had help. We're showing you they had help. This was coordinated. There's much more than meets the eye. When I have enough information, I'll be glad to talk to the community about my issues or what I need, anything I may need to apologize for. But what I'm telling I'm not finished. But what I'm telling the community, this is a public safety issue first and foremost. There's much more than meets the eye. We are digging, and we are not going to stop till we find out what happened.
Tonight to make sure that your
Thank you.
facility is safe. What is OPSO doing tonight to make sure that this?
Yeah, so there you hear her saying it's intentional. There's more than meets the eye, the timing with the beginning of the sheriff's race. And the implication is that somehow these inmates were able to coordinate with people inside the jail that were aligned with Sheriff Hudson's opponents and make this happen. Obviously, they say that they believe that there's good reason to believe that that this was an inside job, but to then take it a step further and make this allegation at the end of this explosive press conference was really unprecedented in my experience.
David, did they get into what they're doing to try and find these people? I mean, that's the big question right now.
Right. Well, that's a big question because we're talking about safety of the public. We're talking about safety of witnesses and victims of crimes. And they are announcing, the FBI and Crime Stoppers announced special high rewards for anybody with any information on how to get back the 9 who are still on the loose. And we're hearing that certain precautions are being taken to protect those witnesses and people who testified at trials and things like that who could be really targeted by these escaped inmates.
Yeah, I think the video that we saw from the sheriff's office, that also was shocking. I mean, I couldn't believe it when we saw, just how, really coordinated this looked. Right. I mean, this looked like it was a coordinated effort. You know, the sheriff went into, and her staff went into how much preparation had to go into this, given that we saw clean cuts on that rebar inside the wall, that they had access to areas that they shouldn't have had access to, which is why they're looking at this as it might be an inside job.
Exactly. I mean, I asked the question at the earlier press conference of the warden, how could they have done all of this cutting with presumably power tools that would make a lot of noise and nobody would notice? And he said that there was not any visibility on the outside and the access from the outside. But then we also see that they coordinate into one cell, 10 different inmates, 2 to a cell, and they all get out of their cells at the same time and get to a single location and then coordinate this. And they had blankets so that they could jump the fence and get over the barbed wire without cutting themselves. And then they were able to discard their jumpsuits, and all of this stuff was obviously planned for a very long time. We know that they do have recordings of calls, jail calls, also of video calls that are on iPads, and they say that they have those recorded, but again, it takes somebody actually physically monitoring those, and it appears that they didn't have that in real time prior to this. They did not even see the video of the escape until after 8:30 in the morning, when the escape happened at around 1 in the morning.
Yeah, it sounds like, they regularly monitor those video cameras, but they do not regularly monitor the calls because there are just frankly too many of them to be able to do that in real time.
All right, David, thank you so much. We're going to keep covering this one. We'll continue to cover our coverage of the inmate search. Just stay tuned to our social media and our website, wwltv.com. We have all the latest updates there. We'll be right back. Okay.
Okay. I forgot you were here, Madeline. Mic check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.